A mother bear, holding the scruff of a small, weak cub firmly in her mouth, appeared right at the doorstep of Ranger Ivan Belov's log cabin. This was an unimaginable event. Her approach lacked any of the stealth or aggression typical of a wild animal. Through the dense undergrowth of the ancient Russian taiga, past sprawling firs and grey pines, she walked with confident, heavy steps directly toward the man frozen on his own threshold. Ivan's heart pounded in his chest. Instincts honed by decades of living in the forest screamed at him to back away, to shut the thick oak door, and not to cross the unwritten law that dictates a line must always exist between man and wild beast. But the she-bear stopped, just a step from the porch. She smoothly lowered her head and gently placed the cub on the roughly hewn wooden planks. The tiny body was barely moving, and one shoulder was wet with blood. The mother bear raised her head, meeting Ivan's gaze. Her eyes were not narrowed in fury, but rather wide open and full of a primal, desperate suffering. It was a silent plea for help that transcended all boundaries between species, an agonizing, instinctive request from a mother to save her child. This singular moment, when a mighty predator cast aside its innate hostility for the sake of its offspring, shattered every rule Ivan had ever known. He had a choice: give in to fear or answer the call of trust. The desperation in the mother bear's eyes was the only authorization Ivan needed. He took a deep, shaky breath and stepped over the threshold. The bear tensed but did not move. Slowly, so as not to provoke the animal, Ivan knelt beside the cub. Its breathing was shallow and ragged, and a deep, torn wound was visible on its young shoulder. His mother's silence was heavier than any roar. Carefully, Ivan lifted the small body, wrapped it in his old canvas jacket, and retreated back into the cabin. He knew he was betting everything on a fragile, unspoken agreement. The she-bear followed him to the door and rested her head on the spot where her cub had just lain. She made no attempt to enter, but her gaze was relentless, heavy, constant, watching Ivan's every move. Inside, the ranger's modest dwelling transformed into an operating room. Judging by the depth and nature of the wound, Ivan quickly concluded the cub had likely been attacked by a large, rogue male bear, a brutal act of territoriality, often fatal for the young. Working with the meager supplies he had, Ivan first stabilized the little one's condition. He meticulously cleaned the wound, treated it with peroxide to prevent infection, a crucial step for survival in the wild. He used a regular sterile needle and thread to put in temporary stitches, trying to close the worst of the gash. He injected the cub with a broad-spectrum antibiotic and settled it near the small cast-iron stove to maintain its body temperature. Every deliberate, gentle action was a silent message to the fierce mother watching from outside: I am trying to help. The gravity of the situation weighed on him. A severe injury and potential internal damage meant the cub needed urgent, more advanced medical care. But first it had to survive the night. Time became Ivan's most feared enemy. He settled in beside it, one hand resting on the cub's chest, counting the faint, rhythmic breaths. Outside, the mother bear was a motionless, dark statue. Her presence was a silent, tense vigil against the dangers of the tiger night. Every minute that passed was a small, hard-won victory in the tiny body's fight for life. The suspense was agonizing, forcing Ivan to root for that fragile heartbeat with all his soul, against all odds. If it could just keep breathing until dawn, they might have a chance. As the pre-dawn light began to filter through the dense crowns of the pines, painting the taiga in soft hues, Ivan finally felt the cub's breathing steady slightly. It had survived the first, most terrifying test. With the cub stabilized, it was time for the next critical step. The sun was fully up, bathing the taiga in bright light. Ivan placed the cub in a small transport crate, carefully padding the injured shoulder with soft cloth. He knew this moment would test the she-bear's incredible trust to its absolute limit. He carried the crate outside. The she-bear rose immediately, her body tensing in an instantaneous display of maternal fury, a low growl rumbling in her chest. Ivan spoke to her in a low, calm, non-threatening voice, as he loaded the crate into his old UAZ Bucanca van. He never looked the mother directly in the eye, focusing instead on the task, showing that his intentions were purely medicinal. He started the engine, expecting a charge or at least an aggressive pursuit. Instead, the she-bear, after a moment of intense hesitation, followed. She maintained a respectful but determined distance, never more than a few meters behind the vehicle as it drove through the taiga toward the veterinary station. This silent escort was the ultimate surrender of control, a painful act of faith that allowed her child to be carried away by a member of a species she was hardwired to distrust. They arrived at a modern veterinary station, a facility equipped with advanced medical equipment. The veterinary team, led by Dr. Anna, was stunned by the sight of the she-bear waiting patiently and stoically near the entrance. The cub was rushed inside. An X-ray quickly confirmed Ivan's fears. The initial attack had resulted in a severe shoulder fracture. Surgery was the only option to save the cub's limb and ensure a functional recovery. The next 2 hours were an emotional marathon for Ivan and Dr. Anna. The fracture was repaired with surgical precision, and the team gave the cub the best possible chance. Afterward, the small patient was kept overnight for observation. As the sun began to set, Ivan drove back to his cabin, his gaze frequently flicking to his rearview mirror, but the she-bear was gone. The next morning, Ivan returned to the vet station to retrieve the cub. Back at the cabin, he placed the crate with the little one, now bandaged and groggy, on the familiar porch. He waited. He scanned the dense undergrowth and the silhouettes of the ancient firs. The she-bear was nowhere to be seen. A deep ache settled in his chest. Had the long separation broken her trust? Had she given up? He realized the truth as he carried the cub inside. Her vigil had ended when the job was done. She hadn't lost faith. She had simply confirmed her trust was well placed and had completely entrusted him with the cub's recovery. Her absence was a profound, silent thank you. Weeks turned into months. The bear cub, now moving with playful energy and strength, was successfully released back into the taiga. The incident became a treasured memory, a story of unbelievable cross-species connection. Life for Ranger Ivan returned to the familiar routine of patrols and conservation work. One late afternoon, Ivan was driving his aging UAZ across a remote stretch of the taiga. The sprawling firs cast long shadows. Suddenly, the engine sputtered and then died completely. He tried to restart it. Nothing. He sighed, radioed his location for backup, and stepped out to inspect the engine. The silence of the taiga felt too immediate, too heavy. His attention was immediately drawn to a subtle movement in the tall grass. Before he could react, the silence was broken by a low, menacing chorus of howls. A large pack of wolves materialized from the bushes surrounding the disabled UAZ. They were lean, coordinated, and numerous, their eyes fixed on Ivan with calculating hunger. The danger was immediate and profound. Ivan quickly scrambled back into the van, pulling the door shut just as the first wolf lunged. He was trapped. The wolves circled the vehicle, nipping at the tires and scratching at the chassis. Their high-pitched calls signaled a drawn-out certain attack. Backup was still an unknown distance away, and the thin metal of the UAZ offered little defense. Fear, cold and sharp, gripped him just as the pack began to press closer to the doors. A sound cut through the howling, a sound that shook the very ground, a deep, resonant roar, closer than Ivan could have imagined. Suddenly, the wolves broke their circle. Their focus shifted to a point behind Ivan. From a cluster of pines burst two figures, a powerful she-bear, and right beside her, a magnificent young male bear with a developing mane. The pair charged the pack of wolves with stunning speed and ferocity. The sudden, overwhelming counterattack sent the wolves scattering. The she-bear moved with ruthless precision, cornering the stragglers, while the young bear stood sentinel, his roar cementing their authority. Ivan watched in stunned silence, his heart hammering with a mix of terror and disbelief. He recognized her instantly. The slight tear in her left ear, a mark he'd seen while cleaning her cub's wound, confirmed it. The she-bear he had saved months ago had returned, and she had brought her protector, perhaps the very cub he had treated, now grown and powerful. The one who had begged for help was now the unexpected savior. The sheer audacity and timing of their intervention was the most shocking moment of his life. The pack of wolves was completely routed, vanishing back into the shadows. The wolves were gone, but the she-bear and the young bear remained. They did not approach the van. Instead, They settled down a respectful distance away, facing the direction the wolves had fled. They had transformed from ferocious rescuers into silent, majestic bodyguards. For the next 10 minutes, Ivan watched them. The she-bear occasionally glanced toward the UAZ, a serene calm in her eyes replacing the panic of their last encounter. The young bear stood tall, his presence an unbreakable barrier. It was a clear, unspoken message. You saved mine, now we guard yours. This act of reciprocation defied all scientific logic and conservation theory. It was pure, simple gratitude, expressed in the universal language of loyalty. The low rumble of another engine finally reached them. Ivan's backup was arriving. As the rescue UAZ crested a low hill, the she-bear and the young bear rose to their feet. They looked back at Ivan one final time. In that brief shared moment, the entire cycle of debt, trust, and rescue was completed. Then, without a sound, they turned and disappeared back into the depths of the ancient firs, melting into the vastness of the taiga. They sought no reward, no praise, only to honor a debt. Ivan stepped out of his UAZ, his legs shaking not from fear, but from the emotional impact of what he had witnessed. He explained the situation to his colleagues, who could only stare at the empty taiga, barely grasping the magnitude of the story. The encounter affirmed the deepest lesson of the wild. Empathy is a universal language, and true trust is a two-way contract that transcends the barriers of species. When Ivan had chosen kindness over fear, he hadn't just saved a life, he had established an alliance that later saved his own. The profound intelligence and loyalty of the she-bear and the young bear redefined his understanding of the relationship between humanity and the natural world, proving that the greatest lessons are often learned not through dominance, but through a willingness to serve. This was the silent, magnificent, emotional payoff for a trust placed months ago.